Hello everyone. Hope you're having a wonderful day. The rain came back like it had unfinished business. Not the soft kind that taps on your roof and makes you want to sleep in. This was the kind of rain that hits sideways, stings your skin, and turns the whole village into one big, slippery trap. Within minutes, the water in the rice fields climbed higher, crawling over the little footpaths like it owned the place. The village road, normally just a dusty stretch people cruised down on scooters, became two long brown streaks of mud with runoff streaming down the grooves like tiny rivers. And right in the middle of that chaos, James was moving fast, but not freely. Because he wasn't just searching, he was acting. That's the weird part. From the outside, he probably looked like a man on a mission. Soaked shirt clinging to his body, eyes locked ahead, jaw tight, pushing through rain like nothing could stop him. But inside, he felt like he was on a stage, like every step mattered. Every choice was being watched, and if he hesitated for even 1 second, he'd lose the only thread he had left. His heart was pounding so hard it felt like it could burst right through his ribs. And that thread, his one fragile clue, came from Ly. Earlier she'd said something small, almost like she was unsure she should even say it. But the second it left her mouth, it changed everything. "I smelled smoke," Ly had whispered. "Like the brick kiln, like when they burn bricks." At first, people brushed it off. Adults do that sometimes, especially when they're scared and overwhelmed. They treat a child's detail like noise. But James didn't. Not this time. Because brick kiln smoke isn't a common smell. It's sharp, dry, bitter. Totally different from cooking smoke or burning trash. If Ly smelled that near her mom, it meant Diep had been close to the old kiln area, or taken somewhere the wind carried that scent. So now, James was out here in the storm, turning his head into the wind like an animal trying to track something invisible. "Do you still smell it?" he asked, half shouting over the rain. Ly clung to his hand, small fingers gripping tight. Her hair was plastered to her forehead, and she looked exhausted, like she was running on fear more than energy. She sniffed, hesitated, then nodded. "A little," she said. "It's there." James forced himself to slow down just enough to think. Rain makes everything smell like wet earth, mud, grass, standing water. It all blends into one heavy scent that's hard to cut through. But if the brick kiln smell was still faintly in the air, they had to stay aligned with it. If they drifted too far off, no. He couldn't even finish that thought. "Okay," he said, voice tight. "We keep going. Stay close to me. Don't let go, all right?" Ly nodded, fast. "I won't." They moved along the edge of the fields where the ground was slightly higher, still muddy, still dangerous, but not immediately swallowing their feet. Every step made a squelching sound. Water ran down James's face into his mouth, tasting like dirt and metal. His arms ached from tension, like he'd been holding his breath for hours. And the whole time, he kept feeling that pressure, that feeling of performance. Like if he didn't look confident, if he didn't move like he knew exactly what he was doing, the world would punish him. The kidnapper would vanish. The trail would go cold. Diep would be gone forever. James's eyes scanned the darkness ahead. The rain made everything blurry, the village lights barely visible behind them. Out here, it was just fields, wind, and water. Then, there it was, a faint edge of smoke, not strong but real. James's head snapped up. He turned slightly, angling his body to test the air again. The smell didn't disappear. If anything, it got a little clearer. "We're close," he muttered. And then, louder, to Ly, "You're doing great. Just a bit more." Ly didn't answer. She just squeezed his hand harder. Meanwhile, not far from where that smoke was coming from, Diep was locked inside an old shack, one of those half-collapsed, forgotten structures people stopped using years ago. It smelled like damp wood, stale straw, and wet dust. The roof leaked in thin lines that dripped onto the floor and made little puddles that kept spreading. Diep sat with her wrists bound, arms trembling from struggling earlier. Her skin burned where the rope had rubbed it raw. Her hair was soaked, clinging to her face. She was cold all the way through, cold in her bones, cold in her thoughts. But she wasn't just sitting there panicking. She was listening. Because when you live around rice fields, you learn what danger sounds like. Rain has a sound, yes, but floodwater has a different one. It's deeper, heavier, like something is moving with force, not just falling. You can hear it under the ground, under the wind, under the storm. And Diep heard it, now. A low rushing sound like water pushing through channels that weren't meant to carry that much, that fast. It wasn't coming from above. It was coming from below, from the earth itself. Her stomach tightened. Localized flash flood. Not the kind that hits the whole province, but the kind that suddenly surges through one area because upstream water gets dumped all at once. 1 minute it's just heavy rain. The next minute, ditches rise and banks collapse, and anything in the path gets taken. For most people, that's pure disaster. For Diep, it was a chance. Her eyes flicked around the shack, searching the floor. The rope wasn't thick, but it was tight. She'd tried pulling, twisting, biting. Nothing worked. She needed something sharp. And then she saw it. A bamboo stick wedged between the floor slats, like part of an old repair job. One end looked rough, splintered, sharpened enough to cut if you worked it right. Diep's heart jumped. Her hands shook as she scooted closer, keeping movements small so she wouldn't make too much noise. The kidnapper was nearby somewhere. She didn't know exactly where, and that uncertainty was its own kind of terror. She hooked the bamboo with her fingers and tugged. It came loose with a soft scrape. She froze. Silence, except the rain. Okay. Diep positioned the sharpened end against the rope and started sawing carefully. The first few strokes did nothing. The rope only pressed tighter into her skin. Her wrists screamed with pain. She forced herself to keep going. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Then, fraying. Little fibers snapped, tiny, fragile progress. Diep bit her lips so hard she tasted blood. The rushing sound beneath the shack grew louder. The flood was coming, and that meant her window was closing. Diep sawed faster now, no longer caring if the rope burned her skin. She needed out. She needed out now. Finally, the rope gave way with a sudden slackness that almost made her fall backward. Her hands came free. For a second, she just stared at her wrists, like she didn't believe it. Then she moved. She rubbed her wrists quickly, flexed her fingers, and pushed herself up. Her legs were stiff. The cold made her joints feel old, like they might not support her. But she didn't have the luxury of waiting. Diep shoved the shack door open and stepped into the storm. The rain hit her like a wall. Wind shoved her sideways. Mud sucked at her feet the moment she stepped out. The fields were half flooded already, water shimmering under the dark sky like a living thing. She looked around wildly, trying to orient herself. There, the faint smoke smell. The kiln area was close. If she could get to higher ground near it, maybe someone would see her. Maybe James was searching. Maybe, please, Ly was safe. Diep started running, or trying to. It wasn't a smooth run. It was stumbling, slipping, catching herself, pushing forward again. Every step was a gamble. If her foot landed wrong, she could slide into a ditch and disappear without anyone ever knowing where. Her breathing came in ragged bursts. Rain filled her eyes. She wiped her face with her sleeve, smearing mud across her cheek, and then she heard it, a voice. Distant at first, but unmistakable. Diep! Her heart lurched. James. She turned, squinting through the curtain of rain, the dark field ahead, and then movement. A figure running toward her. And next to him, small, soaked, clinging close, Ly. Diep's lungs seized like she forgot how to breathe. Relief hit so hard it almost knocked her over. She lifted her arms instinctively, as if her body was trying to pull her child closer just by reaching. Ly! She screamed, voice raw. James! James saw her too. He accelerated immediately, boots sliding in mud, not caring. His eyes were wide, shock, relief, urgency, all at once. "Diep! Hold on!" They closed the distance fast. For one breathtaking second, Diep thought, "We made it." James's hand reached out. Diep reached back. Their fingers brushed, just enough for her to feel his warmth through the rain. And then the shadows moved. A man stepped out like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. The kidnapper's arm shot forward, grabbing Diep from behind and yanking her back hard enough to snap her shoulders. Diep screamed. James's face twisted in horror as he lunged again, but Ly let out a scream too, high and sharp. And James stopped for a split second out of pure instinct, because Ly was right near the edge of the field ridge, and the water was rising. That pause, one heartbeat, one frozen moment, was all it took. The ditch bank cracked like something tearing. Then the earth gave way. Mud and water surged forward, and the ground under all of them collapsed as if someone had ripped it open with their hands. And suddenly, Diep, James, and Ly were sliding, dragged by gravity and floodwater, straight into chaos. Everything happened at once, so fast it didn't even feel real. One second they were standing on that narrow ridge, and the next, the whole edge of the ditch just gave up. The mud cracked, the soil tore loose, and the ground slid out from under them like a rug being yanked away. James felt his boots lose traction immediately. His stomach dropped as his body pitched forward, and the cold rush of water hit his shins, then his knees. The ditch wasn't a ditch anymore. It was a moving, angry channel, swollen with runoff and pulling hard like it had hands. Ly screamed again, and that sound snapped James into pure instinct mode. He didn't think, he didn't plan, he just reacted. "Ly!" he shouted, twisting his body toward her. She was slipping, tiny feet skidding on mud, her whole frame pitching toward the water. James launched himself, throwing his weight sideways onto the collapsing bank. His hand shot out and caught her by the arm and the back of her shirt. For a split second, he almost lost her because she was so slick and light. But he tightened his grip and yanked with everything he had. Ly slammed into his chest, and he wrapped both arms around her like a shield, pressing her face into his shoulder. He could feel her shaking violently, her breath coming in panicked bursts. "I've got you," he said over and over, like if he repeated it, it would become unbreakable. "I've got you. I've got you." But even as he held her, his eyes snapped back to Diep. Because Diep was still out there, still in the chaos, still being pulled. The kidnapper, thrown off balance by the collapse, had loosened his grip. Diep's body twisted free, but freedom didn't mean safety. The floodwater grabbed her like a trap, snapping shut. Diep slid down the muddy slope, half on her side, half on her stomach, hands clawing at the earth. Her hair was plastered to her face, her clothes whipping around her as water surged past. Her eyes locked on James for one terrifying moment, wide with panic, but also with something else. A message. Don't let go of the child. Even in that split second, even while she was being taken, her first thought was Ly. "Diep!" James roared, voice ripping through the rain. He tried to reach for her with one hand while still clinging to Ly, but the bank under him was crumbling. Mud slid from beneath his elbow. Water surged and slapped against his ribs. If he leaned even a little too far, he'd go in too, and Ly would go with him. He forced himself to anchor his body, digging his knees into the mud, trying to create a stable point. His free hand stretched out, fingers splayed, reaching for Diep's wrist. Diep reached back. Her fingertips skimmed the air. For one impossible heartbeat, James thought he might actually grab her. But the current surged again, harder, faster, and it pulled Diep away like she weighed nothing. "No! No!" James screamed, throat burning. Diep's body spun in the water, her clothes and hair swirling like dark ribbons. Rain hammered the surface so hard it turned everything into a blur of white splashes and black flow. Diep tried to keep her head above water, coughing, choking, fighting, her arms thrashing for something to hold. James lurched forward again, desperate, but his foot sank into mud up to his ankle and locked him in place. The suction grabbed him like cement. He yanked, but the more he struggled, the deeper he sank. It was the cruelest thing. He could see her, but he couldn't move. "Ly, hold on to me," he shouted without looking, because he couldn't risk shifting his grip. Ly clutched him tighter, crying into his shoulder. James' eyes stayed fixed on Diep as she was carried farther down the ditch line, away from the bank where he could even attempt to reach. "Diep!" he screamed again, voice turning hoarse. "Diep!" Diep's cries were swallowed by the roar of the water. The storm ate her voice, like the rain itself was trying to erase her from the world. And then came that moment, the one that haunts you later, the one that replays in your head with no warning. Diep's hand rose above the surface, just her hand. Fingers spread, trembling, reaching out like she was still trying to touch the life she was being torn from. James's entire body surged forward. His mind went blank. His heart slammed against his ribs like it wanted to break free and chase her itself. But he couldn't move. The mud held him. The water threatened to pull him. Ly clung to him like an anchor made of love and fear. And Diep's hand disappeared beneath the black water. Gone. James froze in a way that didn't feel human. Like his body had turned into stone to keep from shattering. For a second, he didn't even blink. Then the world hit him all at once. Rain, wind, Ly's sobbing, the cold, the mud, the roaring ditch that kept flowing as if nothing had happened. James sucked in a breath so sharp it hurt. He tried to scramble along the bank, to chase, to run downstream, to do anything that looked like saving her. But every step was a fight. The mud was thick, heavy, pulling at his boots. The ridge was unstable, collapsing in small chunks. Water rushed over the edges in bursts, cutting off safe footing. And Ly was still in his arms. He looked down at her, tiny face pressed to his chest, eyes squeezed shut, mouth open in a sob, shivering so hard her teeth clicked. She was alive. She was safe. And that fact somehow made the loss hurt even more, because it meant a choice had been made by the universe. A trade. They got the child, and the flood took the mother. James dropped to his knees at the edge of the field, still holding Ly tight. Mud soaked through his pants. Instantly, his shoulders trembled, not from the cold anymore, but from something deeper. Shock, rage, grief, all tangled together. Ly lifted her head slightly, looking around with frantic eyes. "Where's Mom?" she whimpered. Where's Mom?" James opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His throat was wrecked from screaming. His tongue felt too heavy, like words didn't belong in his mouth anymore. He stared at the ditch instead, at the swirling black water twisting past, carrying debris, ripping at the banks, moving like a living creature. In the darkness, it looked endless, like it could run forever and never give anything back. Ly started crying harder. "Mom! Mom!" James squeezed her tighter, pressing his cheek against her wet hair. His voice finally came, cracked and broken. "I'm here," he whispered. "I'm here, baby." But his eyes never left the water. Somewhere inside his mind, he still saw Diep's hand reaching up, still saw the panic in her eyes, still felt the brush of her fingers earlier, how close they'd been to making it. And under all of that, under the fear and grief, there was a brutal, burning certainty. This wasn't just an accident. The kidnapper had been there, waiting, watching, timing it, using the storm like cover. James's jaw tightened. His grip on Ly adjusted, protective, steady, like he was silently promising her he would not lose her too. Behind them, the rain kept pounding the fields. The smoke smell from the kiln still floated faintly through the air, bitter and stubborn, mixing with wet earth and floodwater. But right now, James couldn't smell anything except loss. He stayed kneeling there in the mud, trembling, holding Ly against his chest, like she was the only thing keeping him upright. And as the episode fades out, The image is burned into your mind. James, frozen at the edge of the field, eyes locked on the swirling black current, because this time they saved their child. But Diep was gone, swallowed by the flood. A brutal downpour floods the village, turning roads into muddy streams and rice fields into dangerous water traps. James, tense and focused as if he's acting under pressure, follows the faint scent of brick kiln smoke, Nye's only clue to where Diep might be.